Yassas, that is more or less all what I was saying. Greek will do the rest in English. Thank you for your introduction, so I don't have to introduce myself, nor my colleague.
I'm also very sure that I will not be able to attend the only two interviews since I have to fly.
Yes, I understand that's for good reasons, so I think we will be able to deal with that. What I would like to do today is give a very brief presentation. I will start with some figures and facts on the Netherlands so that you have an idea of which country I represent or we represent. And after the presentation, I would like to give you the opportunity to ask questions. To ask questions, Mrs. Apostolidi and myself will try to answer. And then maybe at the end I could say a word or two about studying in the Netherlands. But I would like to leave that to the end. We were asked to give my presentation name. We came up with balancing solidarity and reforms. Balancing solidarity and reforms is at the moment something we all deal with. Within the Eurozone, within the European Union. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Natasha, could you go to the next slide? Yeah. But let me first say something about the Netherlands. I suppose you know where the country is. But just to recalculate, the country is small in Greece, it's 33,000 square kilometers. If you include all the lakes, you are about 40,000 square meters, but that still will be much less than Greece. There are about 17 million inhabitants. That in return is much more than Greece. And our capital income is relatively high, at 46,000 in terms of 2012. And that makes us after Luxembourg, and it used to be Ireland as well, the country within the European Union is the second highest per capita income. We may talk a bit why this is, if you want to. Mr. Apostolidi and myself, we work here at the embassy in Athens. The embassy is basically a representation of, according to constitutional law, the ambassador is the representative of our head of state with the head of state of the host country. So he officially represents our king, His Majesty the King, with your president. But in practice, what we do, we represent the government of the Netherlands with the government of Greece. So it means that on a daily basis, we have contacts with your Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also with your Ministry of Finance, with the Greek Parliament. And our role is to convey messages from our government to the Greek government, but also to convey messages from the Greek government to our government and to report on what's going on in Greece. That's the embassy. And in Greece, because we have about, last year was about 400,000, this year we expect almost half more, 600,000 Dutch tourists a year. We have a Dutch community in Greece. We estimate, but we aren't sure, of about 10,000 people. And to help those people when they need assistance, we have a network of about 10 honorary consulates, some of the islands, some of on the continent. That is the Netherlands. do export to Greece, which makes Greece important for us. As you can see, now slowly moving towards the crisis. Since 2008, these exports have gone down, and it also shows why it is also in our interest that the Greek economy starts to grow again. It's not only opportunities for the rest, it will also be new opportunities for us. I'll skip this. You can go back to this if you really want to know. I'll skip this too. And I'll be very brief on this one. It's not a competition of who's hardest hit by the crisis, because that's not a very useful discussion. But it's for the rest of what I'm going to say, it might be helpful for you to know that the Netherlands has been affected by the crisis as well, which means that also in the Netherlands people, I said, we have a high capital income, but it's lower than it used to be. People spend less and they have very low confidence in the economy going back, which makes them that, like in Greece, people are in a sour mood and don't want to spend. It's going too fast, and what makes it more interesting, which is not here, you can read it for yourself. What happened in Holland is that, and in that respect, Holland looks a bit like Ireland. We had a real estate bubble in the sense that since 2009, real estate prices are going down, and that also meant that some of the Dutch banks who lent a lot of money on real estate, also on other things, have run into difficulty. And it's good to remember that Greece is not the only country to nationalize its banks. In Netherlands we have 4 big banks in that respect that works very much like Greece. Out of those 4 banks, 2 have been nationalized. The last one was this February. And the third one has received large amounts of government aid to survive. That's a bit of background against which my government tries to run our country and looks at the relations with Greece. You can skip this. Okay. Then to the Netherlands and Greece. As you can see, we're both on the same continent. We're both members of the European Union, which means, well, it's not the same thing, but that we are both members participating in the European common market, which also defines the way our economies work. Both countries are members of the Eurozone. We have the same currency. Not surprising because we've been talking about that for the last 3-4 years. And but it's also important to remember it's not only economic ties that bind our 2 countries. For instance, both countries are members of Schengen and members of NATO, where we want to be just to sum up is to show that there is actually quite a lot that binds us, which our 2 countries bring our 2 countries together. Okay, then to the, as Professor Stiers announced, onto the question solidarity and reforms and the way my government looks at the whole issue of the Eurozone crisis, the Greek crisis. But I would like to start this presentation by a question, and that is, you saw the Dutch per capita income, which is at 42,000. The Greek per capita income is about half of it, yeah. And then the question is, why is this? What is the Greek potential? What are the reasons? Because if you look at the two countries, you'd say both countries should be able to have the same per capita income. Greece has its position, which makes it ideal for logistics. It has a climate which makes it ideal for tourism, but not only tourism, but also for horticulture and a certain amount of agriculture. But it's more important, Greece has a very well educated population, professional population, of which you are part at the university. And so if you look at Greece this way, then the question is, why don't you end up with the same per capita income? And I think the answer to that is that things in the past have been organized differently. There's of course, in economic terms, there's of course factors like you're further away from the big demographic centers in Europe. But then with technology, you can wonder whether that is actually that much of a disadvantage. So you have to look, what does hold Greece back? And then if you look at it this way, then you have to start thinking about, okay, if it's the way we organize things here in this country, what would you like to change? And I think your government, everybody who's watching television in this country knows what the government is trying to do. A year ago, all these measures were sort of announced, yeah, well, we run out of money. We have people that tell us that will only give us money if we do this. We don't really do want to take those measures because it's all of the bad Germans. Actually, it's Mrs. Merkel personally who tells us to do this. Okay, there's of course a exaggeration, but that was a bit the sense of everything is okay, but we don't need to reform, and it's basically imposed openness from the outside. I think if I read the newspapers and I listen to what my colleagues tell me, things have changed a bit in the last year. Now the government is actually explaining that certain reforms were necessary and that certain reforms actually can be successful. And then that's basically when you look at the Greek potential and you ask what has to be done. I didn't even talk about what needs to be done outside of this. But there is, as we are bound together by all these organizations, we are both members of the European Union and the Eurozone, it's not only a Greek problem. It's also important for us, as you saw at our export figures. The Netherlands also has an interest in the Greek economy getting back on its feet and growing again. You could also turn it around. It's very difficult if in 2009, when the financial markets came to the conclusion that Greece couldn't pay its debts any longer, and therefore thought there was such a high risk that they raised their interest rates on the Greek debt. at that time it was clear that you had a choice. Either you let things go the way they went, probably Greece would have entered into a default. The government wouldn't have paid its debts, and you would have had a situation where the government has run out of money. Well, maybe an interesting exercise to think what could have happened. What happens when the government runs out of money? But fortunately, there the European Union, especially Eurozone countries, decided that that was not something they wanted to happen. So that's when the whole bailout program started. But the bailout program started also with the recognition, and I think it's very important to remember that you can have, it started as a financial problem to get the money to pay the debts. And it's possible to get sort of balance your books, to have a surplus in the end. But that's all very well, but if you don't have a way of earning the money to pay those debts, you may have a solution now within 2 or 3 years it may go wrong again. So what is really important, I think everybody agrees on that, is that the Greek economy starts to grow again. And then the whole discussion, of course, is much more an economic discussion on what makes the country grow. And here, when asking what is the Greek potential, and why this potential hasn't been realized, you come to the conclusion that probably structural reforms are needed. Structural reforms in the sense a government that has a high productivity, that provides services to the economy. An economy which is competitive, which means that prices are competitive with prices from other countries. One of the complaints you very often hear is that the crisis was caused by cheap money, and that the euro basically, because it allowed for low interest rates, was a way of finding an outlet for surpluses for the German trade surplus, for the Dutch trade surplus, the money that people gain, you have to do something with it. So it's easier to send this money to countries which want to have credit, take this credit, and therefore use this credit for consumptive ends. But in the end, what happened is that it was a convenient consumer market for Northern Europe. This argument is almost presupposing intent. It doesn't, because then if you want to reverse this trend, then for instance you have to make sure that Germany and Holland don't have surpluses, and that you can export to these countries and earn your money that way. But what you basically say is, okay, make sure that those countries are less competitive in relation to Greece, so we can export. And that's fine if you, together in a world that is a standalone world, but we are actually, if you go back to the map, you see there's Europe, but there's more than Europe. You also have to compete with upcoming economies like Greece, like China, Brazil, India. And by not increasing your own competitiveness, but by requesting the others to absorb more of your products, and therefore lowering their competitiveness, you don't solve the problem. You basically move all in the same direction, and in the end you will have to build a wall around Europe because you will have to protect yourself from countries like China and India. So that argument may be true, but it doesn't give an answer to the solution. Requirements. Well, I've talked about the bailout memorandum and the idea that it's not enough to have your finance in order, but also that you need structural reforms to get your economy back on its feet. And the instruments, well, the instruments are known. We at the embassy we have discussed on that whether this is the perfect way that you have a troika of European Commission, European Central Bank, and the IMF visiting every 3 months and then having a public row over all the progress that has been made. But for the time being, we haven't found, or at least not we at the embassy nor our government, but we are here with 16 other governments. We haven't really found another way of dealing with how to do this dialogue between Greece, between the other bailout countries and the European institutions that we got the money to keep things going. And this worries us because, and then I'm back from economics back to politics, what you see is that especially in the press, you see lots of stereotypes. In the Greek press you read that Germany is out there to establish its dominance. It wasn't able to establish during the Second World War. Greece has to be punished for bad behavior. They want us to be a cheap source of labor. In the press, these are all popular statements, but if you look at it economically, they don't make sense. Why would it be in Germany's advantage that Greece is a poor country? It reduces your opportunities to do trade. What is so interesting about dominating a group of countries that are in crisis? But on the other hand, of course, in the Netherlands, especially as things are not going very well in the Netherlands, we have those stereotypes too. You may not know it, but all Greeks retire at the age of 50. And the reason why the country's in crisis because everybody's on the beach, not knowing that in January it's maybe not a place you want to be. But so there's also small things have been sort of magnified into generalizations about Greece, which are evidently not true. And the problem with that is that if you start to believe these things, you start to see each other in a different way. You're not willing to listen to each other any longer, and it makes it much more difficult to find a common solution. And I think the solidarity here is not only in giving money for the European stabilization mechanism, which actually is our loans, but it's also willingness to continue to think together on how we're getting out of this crisis. Greece is very hard hit, probably because of very serious reforms that, if they had been carried out 10 years earlier, it might have been less painful. Northern Europe, in Germany, the economy is slowing down. People are, in that respect, affected by the crisis. And it's important that we continue team to think together on how to get out of the crisis. I didn't talk about the banking union, but if you have questions, because that's one of the instruments that's at the moment discussing also. If you have a question about it, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about what I know about it. I would like to leave it here. Just a couple of thoughts on how you can look at the crisis, how we at the embassy look at the crisis. But maybe you have some questions. Or maybe need some time to think about what I said.
Maybe in the end, when Miss Apostolidi finish as well, we'll have all the...
We're actually planning on answering your questions as part of the discussion. Discussion with you.
Could you please repeat the question? How do we view the crisis?
Sorry?
Is it how do we view crisis or how?
No. What I said is what you often see is that people come up with all kinds of explanations.
Why Greece is in this position?
Yeah. Okay. Why Greece is how we see them? I think what's and then you can read through the Troika reports, which you can find on the internet. You will find an analysis, but for me, to summarize, it's basically the government that, if you look at statistics, government revenue has gone up and expenditure has gone up slowly since 2002. What you see at around 2008, that expenditure goes up higher and the revenues go down. Not much. They're very continuous curves. But if you don't take any measures, then you have a gap of this in 1 year, and then all of a sudden you have a gap of that, and there's no way to. Yeah, okay. So that was the financial part. The other problem was that also the trade deficit went up. With the money that was borrowed, people didn't make investments in new factories, a bit in infrastructure, but mainly cars, real estate. And that's fine to make the economy go, but it's not real investment. So you had a trade deficit that went up. There are people who say that trade deficit actually was higher than necessary because the government basically stimulated this kind of implementation because you have import duties and VAT, which basically boosted government revenue. So it made it easier to meet the criteria for the euro in 1999 actually that they started.
So basically what you're saying is that Greece was borrowing money to buy German cars.
Yeah.
It wasn't investing in the country.
And then, as I said, I think Varoufakis, made really gloss. He writes, it's very readable. And his theory is basically that Greece was a victim of being an excess of credit, which basically had to find an outlet. And it was able to find an outlet in Greece, but my answer to that is yes, because of the lack of competitivity at that moment of the big economy. They did absorb this credit and wasn't able to sort of provide something in return.
It's not only German cars that Greece was buying. There's a lot of products.
So they were just like.
But it's a lot of products that used to be produced in Greece, but Greece stopped being competitive in producing them, so they started importing them into Greece from other countries. So if you import everything and use the money as all of
Exactly, it's fact. Greece imports more than a lot of our nation.
But then you have, the next question is, and I think that's almost as important question as the first one. The first one is, why did Greece Balkans, maybe Kenyan may not be a good example, but for instance, olive oil, cheese.